Hello and welcome in to season 4, episode 2 of the Mean Streets podcast. William Galloway joined over Zoom with Britton Johnson. If you're watching on YouTube for the first time, welcome to our YouTube viewers. And on podcasts, we appreciate all of our listeners, our hundreds of thousands of listeners every episode. If you're new to this podcast, Britton and I talk about Alabama basketball. Britton played at Alabama. He was a walk-on for 4 years, played at Samford using his COVID fifth year. So we talk a little bit of Samford hoops as well. But Britton, season 4, episode 2, we're full swing now with the regular season underway. Alabama just making its return home from Vegas after spending the week out there. The football team got the win over the Iron Bowl. That's not what we're here to talk about, though. So, what were your takeaways from Vegas and what you've seen from the Crimson Tide through the first little stretch here as we have a 6-2 overall record?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this season's been a bit of a mixed bag so far, but you look back at every year during the Oates era, and none of the teams have been complete in November, which I think is kind of the key. Even the Brandon Miller year, which is the year that Alabama was the number one overall seed going in November, got smacked by UConn, which obviously ended up being the eventual national champion. But I don't think Oates has ever won a November Thanksgiving type tournament. So um, all I was to say is with the style of play that we take on, it's just never going to be a complete product in November. And so, if they're you're to point at anything as kind of the disappointing part to me, it would be I think the individual defense hasn't been phenomenal. But again, and we were talking about this before we recorded, is that you know we've had some big wins. That Houston win is massive, and we're 3-0 now against the Kelvin Sampson Houston teams, with all three of those games just being absolute dogfights. I mean, it's like the only thing I can compare it to is like early 2010s or late 2000s LSU football games where you knew going into it, like, this is going to be an absolute war, and whoever's tougher team is probably going to win. And so to win that is such a big mark for our season, I feel like, in the direction it's going to go. Our two losses, I feel like we've just kind of, honestly, I think Purdue did not miss a shot, it felt like. And Oregon exposed a lot of our problems with individual defense. They made some great floaters in the mid range, and their big guy gave us a lot of problems. But um, overall, I'm pretty excited about the direction of this team because we haven't played our best ball, and we either won or been very close to winning all these games. And very easily could have won the Players Era tournament despite playing, I think, C minus level basketball for the most part. I think the Houston game we played at a high level, but the last two games we did not play very well. And so, your best player is not playing great so far this year. Mark Sears, hadn't had his best game so far. And again, we're still there. And so I've been really encouraged by the level of play we've seen from Modi. I've been really encouraged by the level of play we've seen from different guys. I think Aiden Holloway's provided a good spark for us. Um, but again, I think that this is a team that is set to peak in February and March, and so I'm hoping that we continue to gel and continue to come together. The biggest negative so far has been last night, just Trelly getting hurt, and um, I just hated that for him. I think from a basketball perspective, getting young blood back, we'll be able to somewhat fill in that gap. But on a personal level, just I hate to see Trelly get hurt. A dude that I think so well encapsulates the culture of Alabama basketball, and it's just a winner, and a dude that really, I think, has a positive impact on the program. And so, not to mention just an elite shooter. So, just bummed to see him go down. But I'm hoping that it's not the worst news. I guess we still haven't heard the exact outcome for him, but just really sad for him. And other than that, though, I think the season still has just so much promise, and everything's right in front of us still.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of good things there, and I think what you said about Sears was impactful. I was going to ask you about him because he didn't have a point in the Illinois game in that CM Newton Classic in Birmingham, and then visibly, look at the stat line, not playing his best ball, what he would say is his best ball for a guy that was kind of a preseason All-American, and the captain coming into this season. But you've had guys step up. You mentioned Mo D. I think it was the Houston game. He had 40 blue collar points, which is just unbelievable. Nate said sometimes they get around 80 to 100. I think that game they got 120, but I mean 40 blue collar points from one guy. Britton, before we get into the next schedule and we kind of analyze some of these more recent games as we just did, tell us a little bit about the blue collar point system, right? I think we've talked about it in past seasons and past years, but kind of break down for us to the best of your ability and your memory how you get those points and what they go towards, because it's you don't get 2 points for making a field goal or 3 points for making a three. It's a non-traditional scoring metric.
Yeah, I mean, and some of them are, countable stats that you'll see on a stat sheet, but a lot of the stuff are things that don't show up. It is, I think defense rebounds are 1 point, offense rebounds are 1.5 points. Like floor dives are a point or a point and a half. It's things like that. Taking a charge is 4 points. A deflection's a point. A steal is either a point or 2 points. And so you kind of add it up like that. And it's just the amount of little impactful plays you can make throughout a game. I mean, sometimes you'll get a miscellaneous point for a great sprint back defensively. Like if you're great in transition defense and you stop something, a block's a point or a point and a half. So they want to reward great effort plays, and that's kind of the whole point of the award or the hard hat, but also just the whole system is to show that the majority of the time the team that is tougher and the team that makes more winning plays is going to win the game. And so that's kind of our whole goal is to go into every single game and win the blue collar points because all of those things, for the most part, you can't. I mean, you can always speak to like, yeah, you can sort of control how well you shoot by the quality of shots you get, but you can't control how well you're going to shoot game in and game out. You can control how hard you're going to play. You can control the level of effort you give and the amount of those tough plays you make. Those are things that they transfer. And so it doesn't matter if you're not shooting well. There's no reason for you not to get on the floor for a loose ball or go after a rebound or stuff like that. I mean, I think a great box out sometimes is a point. It's like those things are non-negotiable, should happen every single game.
Absolutely. All right, so we look
But
ahead
yeah,
now. We kind of talked about some of these last games. I appreciate that insight into the blue collar stuff, and that's something a lot of people know but aren't able to calculate or know exactly. So that insight is certainly appreciated. Thank you, BJ. Alabama takes on a North Carolina team this Wednesday who's currently 4-3, but the game is in Chapel Hill. And then after exams, Alabama's got Creighton. So this kind of climb and climb and climb of this regular season gauntlet only continues to grow. You go on the road, and then you welcome a really good Creighton team who is out there. And I know our coaches got to scout in Vegas. Shout out to Ty Davis for getting his first collegiate start in that event. So that was awesome for Ty and his family and his teammates, but we'll see him in Tuscaloosa on December 14th. So, Britton, as you kind of continue this climb, right? We talked last week or our last episode about how it's not all about winning. You got to compound and play with who you have, right? And that is kind of up in the air right now for this Alabama roster, but it's not necessarily about wins and losses at this point in the season. So, a lot of discouraged fans right now, what would your message be to them as it's visible that Alabama isn't playing to the level at which they want to play? And they've got two really good opponents and then a couple more coming up to round out non-conference before conference play starts in the new year. How do you face that adversity as a team when you're not playing your best ball and you're playing really, really good opponents night in, night out?
yeah. I mean, I think everyone came into this season looking at the roster on paper and saying, well, we have one of the best coaches in the country. We have maybe the best roster in the country. So in November, we should be the best team in the country. And that was never the goal of Coach Oates. Now, obviously, if it happened, he wouldn't have been upset about it if you were just playing great ball. But his goal and the team's goal is to be the best team in the country in March. And that's what we're building towards. I think it reminds me a little bit of in high school, Bucky would schedule all these like weird, tough games in the early part of the season because nothing mattered at that point. It was all about area play and then region, like getting to all of that in terms of determining postseason. And that's what we were trying to build towards. And, I think in college basketball, so often you try to schedule your way to wins so that you can have the best resume possible in March. But we are at a point as a program where we're not worried about making the tournament. which is such a luxury. So we get to almost take the same approach that high school teams were able to take into their season of trying to build towards January, except we're trying to build towards January, February, and March. So we're trying to be the best team we can be in SEC play, and then we're hoping that all these tough non-conference games will transfer into success against similar type opponents in March. Because if you only schedule teams that will help you succeed against SEC opponents, that might really help you in January and February. But if you're trying to win a national championship, you have to be able to beat every team of every style. So um, I understand all the discouragement and disappointment so far with some of the results, despite the fact that I think a few years ago anyone would have taken the start. Um, but I'll say this: what I've seen, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier. We aren't playing our best ball, and we are in all of these games against really high level competition. So I think it speaks to the ceiling of this team. And I just firmly believe
Example
we're
A,
going to
sorry
reach
to
it.
interrupt, but scoring 100 in Birmingham, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, and Mark Sears not having a point.
Yeah, exactly. And so and you're seeing the depth at work. I think Aiden Hall has been way better than I expected him to be. You've had different guys step up in different ways. I mean, I think we have I
Pylon's
think,
been unreal.
yeah, I mean, Aiden Sherrell's been really good in spots. And so Darion Reed is just a phenomenal defender. Like, I've seen him step up at different points. I don't think we win the Houston game without him. I mean, his defense was spectacular that game. And so
Jaron
every guy
Stevenson
has
found the
contributed
bottom of
in
the
different
net. I'm
games.
sorry to keep interrupting.
No, you're good. I mean, I just think like every guy has contributed already, and what you're going to see is as this team gels and gets closer together and gets better defensively, because Oates is going to get to a point, and he's probably there now. Is like, if you're not going to guard, if you're not going to help us defensively, you're not going to touch the floor. Um, which is always his approach and his mindset. But early season, you just kind of let guys see what they can do, um, and just kind of work them in. But especially when it comes to January, February, and you see that rotation, I don't want to say shrink, but just kind of get more solidified. I think you'll see more confidence from the guys in their roles, and so that's kind of the there. You have so many guys that are used to being the guys on their team, and with such a talented team, it's just kind of creating that pecking order. And um, once we get Mark going, I have full confidence that this team still the sky's the limit. So I
Absolutely.
no reason to be hanging your head off a couple of losses early. Still walked away with what, like 1.25 million from that tournament. So
Yeah, plenty
players should be
enough
upset about the
to
Oregon game,
buy some
and
groceries and feed your family, get a couple Christmas gifts for your
yeah,
girlfriend, your siblings, and your parents and all that stuff. They'll be just
no
fine.
kidding. Also, we're not going to dwell on the Oregon game, but that was absolutely a block and not a goaltend. And so I don't want to blame the result on that because I got a few more buckets after that, but that definitely felt like a turning point, and unbelievable play by Jaron to get back in the game, and good to see him get going this week. Obviously he had that tough start of, I think it was 0 for 18 for his first 18 3-point attempts, but for him to come back, and this is what it does. He says, get in the gym if you're not shooting well, but if I'm putting you out there and you're open, shoot the ball. And so, giving Jaron the green light, even as he's struggling, and you're starting to see him make shots and make them with confidence. And that's going to be huge for us because when he's playing high level basketball, he can impact the game on both levels or on both ends of the floor. And so, just again, really excited to see this team gel and just start playing uh, Alabama basketball at the highest level, because I think this team still has the opportunity to be the best team of the Oates era
Yeah.
and of the school history, for that matter.
Yeah. Hey, you said one thing. If Nate always says, Coach says, if you're not hitting shots, get in the gym. And nobody embodied that better than Mark Sears after that Illinois game, getting back to Tuscaloosa, pulling out the gun and having, I think, what is it, 600, 700, 800 shots that night. And he had an
Yeah,
85%, shooting percentage. It was 235 in the morning. That was unreal.
yeah, and I'll be the guy to be upfront and say, normally I don't love when guys are posting what they're doing work wise, but it's like, do I love the fact that our best player is doing that, and regardless of what time of day he's doing it, to shoot over 80% on the gun is it's elite. It's not
Yeah.
good. It's elite. I think good 3-point shooters in college. If you make 70% open threes, that's pretty good. Um, that's kind of what you're expected to do. And if you make 75, you're like really good. If you're making 80 plus, you're an elite level shooter. And so
What was your record and the most amount you ever shot?
I shot over 1,000 one day. I don't remember what percent I shot.
I mean, over like 8 hours, or were you in the gym all day, or what's the story there?
I don't remember. I think it was definitely during my senior year because I remember doing it. It was probably an hour or two. I don't know. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but yeah, I probably put about 1,200 shots, and I don't remember the percent. It wasn't 80. It was probably below 80.
Yeah,
80
that
is
means you're a
really dang
good shooter,
impressive.
though. We knew that.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere in the 70s, probably 74-ish, 75.
That's BJ for you. Hey, Main Streets Podcast, Season 4, Episode 2. I'm William Galloway. If you're new here, we appreciate you listening. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify. One thing we always do on our interviews is leave BJ with the last word. So, Britton, give us a word and let us know, your final thoughts as we head into this North Carolina and then Creighton game. Hopefully, after Creighton, we'll get back on and have episode 3 of season 4. But we'll leave the last word with you. We appreciate all of our viewers and listeners here on the Mean Streets podcast.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a long last break. It's going to be broken in three parts. One big rivalry game coming up next week with the Creighton Blue Jays. Everyone knows that's our biggest rival. And so, all eyes should be on that game in Tuscaloosa. Second thing is if we beat North Carolina, we officially own them. Like it is no longer University of North Carolina, it's University of Alabama and Chapel Hill. And the third thing is I really can't believe that they're going to let us back in the playoff in football.
We
I
are
mean,
back, baby.
I really think it's going to happen. And, what a world we live in. So, all those playoff expansionists are not going to be happy when a 3-loss Alabama makes a run. So, roll tide. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Excited for this fun season.